All right, everybody, what is going on, man? How y'all doing? This is your tour guide around the SWAC Seawells coming at you. And today we're gonna take our first look at my predicted win totals for each division team. This is really a rough draft, so it's way too early. Um, I'm gonna probably nail it down a little bit more once we get closer to the season and after I get through my previews. I've only had a basic look at some of these teams. At this point in the schedules, and of course, there's a lot that can change between now and the start of the season. So this is kind of based off of what I know from the end of last season to what I know now, which is not a lot for a lot of teams, but I'm at that basic research stage. So um, just gonna throw this out there for a rough draft. Some of these numbers might be too high, some might be too low. I'm gonna dial it down or dial it up depending on what my research shows. But in the meantime, in between time, man, one thing we can say is that it is time to start talking football. This is June. Media Day is on July 15th, so we're gonna dive into the East Division of the SWAC with a way too early prediction win total. This is over under for you people who like to do this for entertainment purposes. Um, this is strictly entertainment purposes only. So um, just enjoy and have fun. Again, these totals are basically my early thoughts. I don't know if some of these I might not even think are the number. I might pick under on some of these. I might pick over, but that remains to be seen. But the East is, at least on paper at this point, shaping up to be a dogfight between basically Jackson State and Alabama State. Everybody else is kind of either rebuilding or trying to get back to where they were. So we're gonna take a look at where we stand. We got heavyweight battles. We got classic games. We got teams that are looking to play spoiler this season. So we're gonna break down every schedule, kind of looking at the guaranteed wins, the tough losses, and those toss-up games that define this conference. Before we jump into that, y'all do me a huge favor and subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button and the notification bell, and comment your thoughts on these win totals and where would you set them. And also, we are looking for people to be on Swag Smoke. Again, I'm stepping away from Swag Smoke to focus strictly on Swag Talk. I will be behind the scenes, but if you're interested or you know somebody interested and you're a dedicated, passionate Swag fan, hit me up on my Twitter account, Swag Talk 76. Shoot me a DM. Hit me on my email at swagtalk76 at gmail.com, and we could chop it up. We're looking to kind of get this thing rolling around the start of the season, so you got time to figure out if this is what you want to do, or find out if somebody would like to do it. Just make sure y'all hit me up, and we can chop it up. So let's go ahead and jump into this. We'll start off as usual with the Bulldogs of Alabama A&M. They coming off of a pretty rough season last season, so I still think that the Bulldogs have some potential under Coach Shea. This is his second year, so first off, I'm gonna set their total at 5. I think that's um one of those prove it to me kind of things. You're not too high, not too low on them. I think it's a safe pick. So you look at what they have in terms of maybe clear paths to victory. They got a couple, they got a couple games early against Miles College at home on September 5th. They also got Bowie State on September 19th. So those are two D2 games that they should have. Then they got Valley on November 21st, which is not a sure win, but is more than a toss up. So those are the three games that you have right there. And then you can say, if they can get a win over Florida and them on September 26th, that gives you 4. Um, Things get a little tricky when you get past that, because after that they have a tough stretch. They got Jackson State and Mobile. They got Grambling for homecoming and the Match City Classic against Alabama State, and a trip to Prairie View. All 4 games that are probably gonna be games that they drop. I mean, all three of those 4 games all away from home. 2 on neutral site, but 3 out of 4 are away from home. So this team hasn't proven yet that they can win on the road, and that can be tough. So that leaves a couple toss-up games. Um, you got Howard in the MEAC Challenge, Tennessee State, Bethune-Cookman, and Texas Southern. To hit that over a 5, they have to win at least 2 of those. So going 2 out of 5, 2 out of 4, and that would give you 5 wins. It's tough. It's tough to get there on paper at this point because they do have some holes to fill, especially on the defensive side of the ball, um, and maintaining health on the offense, which wrecked this team last season. 5 is not an easy task, but when you start off with a couple of D2 games, and I think a Howard game that's manageable, that's 3 out of your first 4 or 5 games that are at least you should be favored. So you kind of ahead of the game right there before you get in the conference play. The Tennessee State game could be a game that could be a needle mover for you at home. So it is a positive schedule. There is that rough stretch. Um, you can probably do what you want in that rough stretch, but all the rest of the games, if you take care of business, I don't think 5 is impossible. As I get closer, I think this might be one that stays at 5 because I think that they do have some firepower there. They do have some potential there. It's just gonna be can they stay healthy? Next up is the Hornets of Alabama State. Now I said this one pretty high because when you look at this team on paper and you look at the schedule on paper, it's not it's not it's not undoable. Let's put it that way. I said it at 10. You could argue maybe a little bit lower. I would probably even go down to 9. But 10 is pretty tough. And I think I made it tough because this team is gonna be a team that a lot of people are gonna be very high on with Andrew Body coming back. You got Jamari Holtzclaw still there, or Nehemiah Hickson's a guy who's probably gonna step up. I think a lot of this is gonna hinge on the defense. They lost their architect, and so they didn't play necessarily up to the part of previous Bama State defenses last year, but they weren't bad. So if they can continue to grow on defense, that number is not impossible. So when you look at the schedule, they start off with Southern. That should be a win. Southern, coming off of a horrible season, got a new coach, have no clue what they're gonna do. So on paper, right now, I would not mark that as anything less than a Bama State win. Then you got Lane College, that's a win. You got Valley, that should be a win. Bethune-Cookman, Florida A&M, and Pine Bluff, all games that they should win. Of course, FAMU is gonna be tough. Um, and Bethune, gave them a go for a little while last season, but I think they kind of in a rebuild. So those games are all manageable games. So if they take care of those games, and then they win the Match Day Classic like they've done in recent years, and then beat Texas Southern on the road. They close out with the Turkey Day Classic against Tuskegee. So that is the bulk of your games right there. So if you're trying to get that over, then you're looking at having to win against Jackson State or Prairie View. So they have to really manage those games. Now, of course, they do have a FBS game against Troy. Um, they gave UAB a go last season, so you never know. But in terms of SWAC games and everything, it's gonna come down to November. Those 2 games against Prairie View and Jackson State are probably gonna make or break this team. If they drop any other game on the schedule besides the Troy game, it, it, let's say if they drop any of those previous games I named that aren't Jackson State or Prairie View, if they drop any of those games, then I don't think they can hit 10 because the margin for error is slim. That's high expectations, but if you think of this team as a contender, you have to have a high expectation for them. The schedule, like I said, I think it shapes up for a 10-win season. Now the difference between a division championship and staying at home is those two games I named. Jackson State or Prairie View. Anything other than that, you can probably count it out. So there is a lot of pressure on this team this season, but I think that they have the ability to get through it. Now, Coach Robinson, he hasn't really got over that hump yet. So this could be that season. And that's why I set the line high. For next up is Bethune-Cookman. Um, this team was a surprise team last season. Last season they finished 5-3 in conference. Offense caught fire after the early portion of the non-conference. Offense caught fire. Defense did enough to help them win games. So they pulled off some upsets and found themselves in a good spot. They lost a lot from this team, including both quarterbacks and some key receivers and return guys. So I think the defense could be better. They do return some guys on the defense who were solid, but a lot of this team is going to always hinge on offense and continuity. And so I set this team at 4. I think that's safe. I think 4 is safe. I'm not quite at the point where I want to set them at a 5 or 6 win team yet, and I'm not at the point where I want to set them at a 2 win team. So I think 4 is a safe number. It's all about the toss-up games here, and they have 4 games that can go either way in conference really. So you got Alabama A&M, Pine Bluff, Southern on the road, and the Florida Classic, which they won last season at the end. So, you know, with Florida and them being in the situation that they in, who knows how they're gonna approach these games. The Florida Classic will be their championship game, so maybe they come out with more fire. But who know? At this point, I think that game's a toss up. To hit that 4 win mark, they got to win 2 of those 4 games for sure, and then try to find a way to steal a game here or there. They have a tough non-conference slate, um, and that's where it's tough at. They also got Virginia Lynchburg for homecoming, so you got Virginia Lynchburg and Valley on the road. Those 2 games are games that I would probably mark as W's. So if you take those two and a couple of those toss ups, you'll find yourself at 4 wins. If you want to get past that, then you're gonna have to beat. Then you have to win your FBS game where you're gonna have to beat Stetson, South Carolina State, Alabama State, Jackson State, Grambling. Those are games I think they're gonna be underdogs in. So if you want to get beyond 4, you're gonna have to win at least one of those games. Um, it's not impossible. It's definitely not impossible, but you have to find a way to make it happen. Um, so this team, I don't know right now. Yeah, I've been looking at a little bit on them. I think a lot of it's going to hinge on how the offense does. If this offense can get themselves on track, not necessarily to the level that they were last season, but if they can get themselves to some degree of competency, then I think they can have a shot. But right now, I think 4 wins is a safe mark for them. Next up is the Rattlers of Florida A&M. Um, I didn't really know which way to go with this team. I think schedule wise, it's kind of tough, but you look at kind of what they have coming back, plus some of the things they brought in, and Coach Quinn Gray in his first season. I think that's going to energize this team. So I set the bar a little bit high for coming off for the last couple seasons. I said it at 6.5. So that means to go over, they got to win 7. That could be tough in his first year, but I don't think it's impossible. Um, they open up, they got Albany State, Pine Bluff, Southern, and Valley. Those are games I think they're going to be favorite in. Um, they do have South Carolina State in the Orange Blossom Classic. I think Alabama A&M. I did mark that as a toss up. You got Bama State and Jackson State as well. Um, you can't count out these toss ups against Tennessee State, Alcorn, and Bethune. So if they can take those, if they can do well in those games that I marked as them being favorite, if they can go 4-0 in those favorite games, then obviously you're in a good spot. You go 4-0 there. You take two out of your three toss ups. You're at 6, and then if you can maybe pull up set or 2, then you can find yourself at 7 or 8. So I don't think it's impossible, but I think again it all hinges on winning those games that you're probably going to be favored in, and then the toss ups. I think if you can take care of that and then you still win those other games, then you find yourself in a good spot. But I think 6.5, it might I might juggle that and drop it down. But at this point, I'm gonna stick with 6.5. Um, because I think that this team is probably gonna end up the number three team in the division. Um, because I'm not sold on anybody else at this point. So I think that they can get better, especially if they get better defensively. I think they'll be a challenger to finish in the top half of the division. Next up is Jackson State. Again, this is a team. I said this ball is super high, um, and it's probably impossible. And so I'm gonna drop. I'm on the show. I'm gonna drop it down. I'm gonna drop it down to 10. Again, they got a lot of holes to fill on defense, but they brought in a lot of talent. Offensively, I think they still got a lot of potential. They got some spots to fill on offense as well, but returning Lockhart at quarterback could be a good factor. They got some good receivers still done. Running game should get solid. Offensive line should be solid. Um, Again, bro, I think defensively is where this team is going to have to kind of work and get themselves back on track. I think they will. It might take a couple of weeks, but I think their schedule really sets up for them. You got Tennessee State. That should be a game they win. You get Edward Waters and Tuskegee. Obviously, two games they should win. You get Southern. They've beaten Southern, what, 6 times in a row, 7 times in a row. So, Southern again got a lot of stuff going on there, trying to fix holes and everything. So those are games early. I think they should be favored in. Alabama A&M, same. Grambling, I would move Grambling to more of a toss up because Grambling gives them problems. But again, they probably be a slight favorite in that game. FAMU, they should be favored. Bethune, they should be favored. Valley, they should be favored. Alcorn, they should be favored. So basically, those games right there put them at 10 if they run that table. Obviously with some questions early, they might not be on par, but the early schedule shapes up for them. So I think that they have a good chance to get there. Um, and you want to go over, then you got to win 11 games, which means you have to beat Bama State um, in Montgomery. So I think the schedule hinges on that game. I think they're going to be favored in all these games. Bama State probably the only game they won't be favored in. Or they could still be a favorite depending on how the season goes. But at this point on paper, they should be favored in pretty much every game that they play, even with the holes that they have to fill. So um, the bar is super high for both teams at the top of the East. Um, I wanted to drop it down a little bit, but on paper, there's not a lot of teams that are gonna be that I can mark as true toss-ups for these teams. So that's why these numbers are super high. Obviously, once I do my previews and my full research, these numbers probably drop a little bit. That's why this is a rough draft, and just a way too early to put something on wax to work with. So that's Jackson State, and finally, we close out with Valley. Um, I said this bar kind of high for Valley. I did 3.5, but this is a team. They got a couple wins, couple games that they should win. And Coach Buckley's second year, I'm not quite sold on how on the rebuild yet. They haven't really wowed me with recruiting. But having a guy like Josh Brown still there definitely helps. Um, they seemed like they were turning the corner last season. They got a big win at the end of the year against FAMU, but this team always plays a tough non-conference schedule. So you got games that they're gonna be underdogs in a lot of games, obviously. But you do start off with you do get Lincoln and the Chicago Classic. So you play Lincoln twice. Is that right? So that so you get Lincoln, Pennsylvania, and Lincoln, California. So you should beat both of those guys. Um, if I'm looking at that right, or are they playing the one? Regardless, they got the Chicago Football Classic. But then you get Nichols, Alabama State, Prairie View, Texas Southern, Alcorn, Jackson, and FAMU. Even with the means, again, that they should be underdogs in. So that leaves them with a couple toss-up games that are gonna be the make or break of this season. You got Bethune-Cookman, uh, and Alabama A&M in SWAC play, and Delta State in the non-conference, which obviously gives you trouble. They also got Sacramento State, so they only play the one Lincoln. So you get Sacramento State, who should be a tough foe. They're moving up to FBS. You get Nichols and Delta State as your non-conference late. So Delta State always give Valley trouble. So I didn't want to mark that as an L for Valley, and I didn't want to mark it as a win for Valley, so that's why I put it at as a toss up. Um, they have to go probably 2 out of 3 in that toss up um, to get themselves in a decent spot. 3.5 is kind of high because you can't push on 3.5, so you got to top it. Um, so you got to win 4. And I don't know at this point. I don't know, but if they go, they could win the game that they favored in, and then sweep those toss ups. Then you find yourself at 4 wins, and everything else out of there is house money. So right now, I'm kind of leaning on dropping that number a little bit because I'm not quite sure on Valley. I've been looking at a little bit of them today, so I'm kind of iffy, but I'm gonna stick with that for the basis of this show. Once I get to my preview, that number might drop a little bit. So when you look at it, all the East is on paper shaping up to be a 2-horse race between Jackson State and Alabama State. Everybody else is probably fighting for third, at least right now. So let me know, where you go. Which of these lines you think are just bait? Which one of these you think I'm just throwing out there to get you to bite on it? Which ones you think are gonna be an easy over? Um, can those two teams top 10 wins? Can the low teams top their numbers? Let me know in the comments. And also, like I said, don't forget to hit me up if you're interested in becoming a part of Swag Smoke. Hit me on